Hey y'all, welcome back and thanks for stopping by. In today's video, I'm going to show you how I made 2 Nightmare Before Christmas inspired DIYs and 2 traditional Christmas DIYs for the Christmas in July playlist challenge. For the first Nightmare Before Christmas DIY, I made Jack's Christmas chalkboard. To get the frame for the chalkboard, I used a 16 by 20 canvas that I picked up in a 5-pack from Hobby Lobby. To remove the material, I flipped the canvas over and used a utility knife to cut along the outside edge of the staples. Then I pulled off the material and any material that was stuck in the staples. I didn't bother removing the staples because they will not be seen once this project's all put together. Next, to make the chalkboard, I used one of the black foam boards from Dollar Tree. To measure out the size I needed for the chalkboard, I laid the frame on the foam board and used a pencil to draw a line across the top. I also traced the inside of the frame so that I would know where the writing should go so that it wouldn't be covered up by the frame. I wanted the frame to be kind of dark, so I used Krylon Chalky Finish Antiquing Wax in the color Dark Vintage and gave the entire front of the frame 2 pretty thick coats and set it aside to dry. I want to thank all of my subscribers for all the love and support. It really means the world to me. And if this is your first time watching, I would love it if you would click that subscribe button and stick around for a while. While the frame was drying, I used a utility knife to cut along the top pencil line to remove the excess foam board from the top of the chalkboard. Then I used a sanding block from Dollar Tree to smooth out the edge of the foam board that I just cut. Since I wanted this chalkboard to look as close to the one in the movie as possible, I went to Google and found a picture of Jack's chalkboard and sketched it out on a few pieces of paper so that it fit exactly in the middle of my chalkboard. Then I centered my sketch onto the foam board, taped it into place, then used a pencil and traced the image onto the foam board using a small amount of pressure so that the image would transfer. If you don't want to hand sketch the images, you can Google search for Jack's chalkboard from Nightmare Before Christmas and use your computer to resize the image and print it out, then trace it onto the foam board or freehand it. Here you can see once I remove the paper that the images are visible on the foam board. Next, I took the white metallic marker from Dollar Tree and went over the images on the chalkboard a couple of times to make them look like they were written in chalk. Now, this does not have to be perfect by any means, and that's the beauty of the Nightmare Before Christmas design, because the less perfect it is, the more perfect it is, if that makes sense. The tendrils for the top of the chalkboard, I again used a picture of Jack's chalkboard that I googled and freehanded the design onto a piece of scrap cardboard I had laying around and cut them out using scissors. I did use a pair of small detailed scissors to cut around the tight spaces in the spirals. Again, if you don't want to freehand this design, you can Google and print out the design and trace it onto the cardboard or foam board. I used cardboard because I found that it was way too difficult to cut the small spirals out of a foam board. Next, I used some black acrylic paint and gave the front, back, and sides of the tendrils 2 good coats, letting it dry between coats. Once that was dry, I took some apple barrel paint and brown oxide, mixed it with a little bit of water, and lightly brushed it across the tendrils on both the front and back. I'm trying to give them the look of rusted metal since that's what they look like in the movie. Next, I took some folk art brushed metal in gold, mixed it with a little water, and lightly brushed it across the tendrils front and back. This time, instead of letting the paint dry, I took some of the brown oxide water mixture and used it to kind of blend the 2 colors together on the tendrils. I am so happy with the way these turned out, and the camera really does not do them justice. Once everything was good and dry, it was time to build the chalkboard. I used a generous amount of hot glue around the edges of the foam board where I'd traced the frame and put the frame into place. The hot glue worked really well to hold this piece together. Next, I hot glued the tendrils to the top of the frame, making sure to put glue anywhere that the tendrils touched the frame for added security. To finish off this project, I took 4 holly berry picks from Hobby Lobby and a random piece of Christmas greenery that I had in my stash and decorated the top part of the chalkboard. I am absolutely in love with how this project turned out. I can't wait to display it year-round in my makeup room, and then of course for Christmas. Let me know what you think about this one in the comments below, or if you want to see more Nightmare Before Christmas crafts in the future. My head is absolutely full of them. As I mentioned earlier, this video is part of the Christmas in July challenge that I'm co-hosting with these three amazingly talented ladies. I will leave a link to each of their channels as well as a link to the playlist in the description box below. For this challenge, we had to pick a favorite Christmas movie and create 2 or more DIYs inspired by that movie. And I, of course, chose Nightmare Before Christmas because it's a yearly staple in my household. Then we also do 2 or more traditional Christmas DIYs as well. This will be a monthly challenge from this month on with a new theme each month. Moving on to Nightmare Before Christmas inspired DIY number 2, I made the ManEating Wreath. For this project, I used one of the 18-inch wreath forms from Dollar Tree and 2 9-foot garlands from Hobby Lobby. If you use a smaller wreath form, you'll only need one of these garlands. I started by wrapping the entire wreath form with the garland. I did want my wreath to be really full, so I did end up wrapping it with 1.5 garlands. To create the eyes for the wreath, I used 2 plastic spoons that I had on hand and painted them with 3 coats of apple barrel paint in the color King's Gold. To make the teeth for the wreath, I used some white foam board from Dollar Tree and a ruler to draw out several sharp-looking teeth. I wanted to have a variety of teeth to choose from when I was ready to assemble. Then I cut them out using a utility knife. I also used a sanding block from Dollar Tree to smooth out the cut edges so that they would have a nice clean look. After picking out the 8 teeth I thought looked best, I took some of the longer skewers from Dollar Tree, cut them down, and hot glued them to the back side of the teeth to make little teeth picks so that I could easily attach them to the inside of the wreath. Any skewers or wooden dowels would work for this step. I just happened to have these longer ones on hand, and I ended up using one and just 1 or 2 pieces from another one. Once the spoons were completely dry, I placed them on the wreath where I thought they looked best and gave it an angry look. Then I took a pair of scissors and snipped the handles of the spoons and used hot glue to glue them into place. Next, I arranged the teeth around the top and bottom sections of the wreath where I thought they looked best, putting the longest teeth on the outside and then the shorter teeth on the inside. Once I was happy with the way they looked, I hot glued them into place by putting the hot glue on the skewers and pushing them back inside the wreath. Again, this is another project that doesn't have to be perfect to be perfect. To finish off the eyes, I used a black paint pen to give them little round pupils. This part is completely optional, but in the movie, the man-eating wreath has arms. And since I had just a little bit of garland left over from wrapping the wreath form, I decided to flip the wreath over and attach the extra garland using 3 zip ties to hold it into place and create the arms. Once the arms were in place, I flipped the wreath back over and fluffed it up so that it looked nice and full and any of the skewers were completely covered. To add the little finishing touches to this project, I took a large red bow that I had in my stash from last year and tied it right in the center of the bottom of the wreath. Then I took some of the frosted red berries from a candle ring I picked up at Dollar Tree last year, cut them apart and hot glued just a few around the wreath where I thought they looked best. And that's it for this one, y'all. I had so much fun making this wreath, and just between us friends, I've always wanted one of these, and I couldn't be happier with the way it turned out. This is going to be another one of those year-rounders for my makeup room. Moving on to the first traditional Christmas DIY, I made a shoehorn angel. For the body of the angel, I used one of the shoehorns that I got at Dollar Tree and took it outside and gave the front and back one good coat of Rust-Oleum flat white spray paint. Once that was completely dry, I brought it back in and used this Wings and Halo set that I picked up at a yard sale years ago. I'm sure with Halloween coming up, these sets will be easy to find just about everywhere costumes are sold. I began by removing the halo from the headband, cutting the wings apart, and removing the elastic bands. Once I had everything removed from the wings, I laid everything into place and then used a generous amount of hot glue to attach the wings to the middle of the shoehorn. I also went back and reinforced the wings everywhere that it touched for added stability. Next, I took some of the extra fabric that I'd cut off the wings earlier and hot glued it across the center of the angel to give it a little something something so that it didn't look so plain and for a little added security. To finish off this angel, I used a generous amount of hot glue to glue the halo into place on top of the shoehorn. I am so happy with how this angel turned out. It's definitely different, but I absolutely love it. And best of all, it only cost me like $1.10 and about 5 minutes of my time. Y'all have to let me know what y'all think about this project. Now for the second traditional Christmas DIY, I made a countdown to Christmas calendar. For this project, I used 2.5 packages of the burlap favor bags from Hobby Lobby, some number stencils that I had in my stash, and some black folk art chalk paint. I began by numbering the bags 1 through 25 with the paint and stencils. I do want to mention that I was lucky enough to get these bags on sale from Hobby Lobby while they were 50% off. Next, I used some red and white baker's twine from Dollar Tree and a Christmas swag I had gotten last year after Christmas on sale. I started by deciding which side of the swag I wanted to be up and which side to be down. Then I flipped it over and tied 5 strands of baker's twine at varying lengths, spacing them out as best as I could. I tried to keep the strands on each end longer than the ones beside it, and then the strand in the middle the longest of the 5. Once I had all 5 strands tied, I took 25 of the tiny clothespins from Dollar Tree and spaced 5 out on each of the strands, alternating the way they faced. Then I used a small dab of hot glue to glue the clothespin to the twine. Then to finish off this project, I placed the bags on the clothespins in numerical order. This is where you would fill the bags with goodies to open each day until Christmas if you were getting ready to put this out. I would suggest not putting anything heavy in these little bags because of the clothespins I used, but you could definitely use bigger clothespins if you needed the bags to hold a little more weight. Y'all, I am so happy with the way this turned out. I absolutely cannot wait to fill it with little goodies for my son to open each day as we count down to Christmas this year. He's always loved advent calendars, so I always try to have one on hand. Here's a final reveal of today's projects. Y'all, I had so much fun creating these DIYs. I love them all, but I think Jack's chalkboard is my absolute favorite. You'll have to let me know in the comments below which one is your favorite. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it and want to see more like it. Also, let me know if y'all are interested in more Nightmare Before Christmas DIYs because I got a bunch of ideas, y'all. And as always, thanks for watching. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Be sure to check out the playlist in the description box to get more fun Christmas inspiration, and I'll see y'all next time.